an enabling environment to be able to achieve. And we're doing that. For example, Nigeria has a local content policy, which the minister has really driven the last couple of years, that is transferring assets to local companies who are effectively focusing on the local market. So, for example, we've had indigenous companies sign gas supply agreements to new plants that are about to be built, okay, because there's an incentive to do so. They're not interested in the export market. The priority is neighbor to neighbor, look for an investment, exploit. So I think that should be put on the front burner as a policy to drive such that we can take these regional projects and, and provide African solutions for African problems.
Is that what you're sort of envisioning with the news that I've seen, which is that you're prepared to acquire Conoco's Nigerian assets? Is that something that is on the table?
Well, most definitely. I mean, those assets also are rich in gas, 65% of those assets in gas. And as the minister mentioned, we do have a central processing facility approval as well. And we will be able to utilize a lot of that gas for the local domestic gas market. That gas is there, and those assets supply 30% of the gas which goes into the Shell LNG plant which gets exported. Once again, it's down to dotting the lines and looking for the incentive and aligning investment criteria with country needs. Country needs cash to come in, but by the time the foreign royalties come in and goes into the coffers and trickles all the way down, there's a lag time. Now, when we provide gas for an industry, we provide instant jobs. Like we've seen companies who've doubled and tripled their size simply because we've taken local gas and a local distribution pipeline straight to their doorstep, invoiced them after they've consumed, so they have a credit as opposed to paying for the diesel in advance, and able to drop their operational costs substantially because they're no longer reliant on fuel. So there is a big link between indigenous participation and indigenous welfare. It goes, or indigenous prosperity. Right. And I think it's an area which we focus on. It's a priority for us, and the rest of the indigenous companies all take very seriously.
Thank you. I want to open up to the audience. We have let's do that for 20 minutes because I'm sure there's some questions from our audience that will be quite interesting for the rest of us. So if you just raise your hand, I believe that the room is small enough. Oh, there's a microphone. So there's a microphone if you raise your hand if you have a question. One person here, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nasir Gewa. My question is for Wale. There is a point that I've been agitating my mind in the last 2 days, and you spoke about it during your discussion. You actually provided the answer, but my question is that during the course of the discussion so far, we had that there are 200 million youths in Africa, and most of them are unemployed. We said for Africa, we've got to find Africa's solution for our integration. And it is in our interest to integrate because with that, we'll be able to find solution to our security issue. You said earlier on that you had to take a reverse gear for some of your investments in the region. Have you given up? Are you going to use the platform ECOWAS and OAU to put more pressure on African leaders to really create the right platform for us to be able to have an enabling environment for investment and engage our very energetic and productive youths? Thank you.
I don't relent in trying to convince our leaders. I'm very active. I think the enabling environment is really a big step forward in creating those jobs. Because at the end of the day, any licensing approval that you require that you can get within a short space of time, enables you put people to work very quickly. And oftentimes, like I mentioned, the issue to do with subsidies, it's taken some countries quite a while to realize that, when you reduce the subsidies, you create the jobs, because it's not that the funding is not there, but it's a misalignment of resources. And so, we can either, subsidize something, for example, or which the benefit doesn't really get to the people, or create jobs which the direct benefit is in their pocket. So we never stop. We're big advocates of getting the enabling environment, and we never stop talking. We keep trying and trying and trying. And there is movement. There's very big movement because look at the commercialization across the continent. And one of the big commercializations that we're also seeing is even the PIB, which the minister is driving in our side, which will see a very vibrant national company, which will be commercialized. And by virtue of it being commercialized and being driven on a return, it's going to create a tremendous amount of jobs, even in our own local environment.
But there's been some difficulty in bringing that to bear. What are some of those challenges that you face with regards to the PIB?
Well, I think that it's fairly straightforward. The PIB we had worked on very ardently, and I got personally involved in it, working for long hours with the various committees. And that was because inherent in the PIB were all the major reforms to try and ensure that the oil and gas sector moved towards more transparency, more accountability, more security for investments, particularly medium and long-term investments. And of course, we did want a few changes in the fiscal regimes, which we felt hitherto had not been particularly favorable towards the country. In the PIB, I think, or some of the issues around the PIB, to a large extent, were fiscal regime issues, which up till now are still being looked at on the premise of both the multinationals and indigenous firms as well. But the flip side of that is that the delays in the promulgation into law of the PIB, because at this point in time it's out of our purview, it's of course in the hands of the National Assembly, are that you do not actually have the legal or legislative backing to take some of the major strident measures in terms of making the industry or the sector a lot more accountable, much less corruption prone. Because whether we like it or not, over the last 25 odd years or so, the oil and gas sector in Nigeria has been known as variously unaccountable, non-transparent, and corruption prone. There is, of course, the vast possibility of the manipulation of even laid down processes that are already put in place. And unless you have backing of the law to actually tear apart these established entities and create, as Wale said, entities that are competitively driven and that are accountable to the state and to the people, it is very difficult, obviously, to erode the sector of some enshrined methods and modes of behavior. So I think that we were, of course, hoping that that would happen. Having said that, I think that whilst, of course, without it being promulgated into law, we cannot go ahead and create a separate national oil company. It's not possible. Right. You know, you cannot create an asset management corporation with equity and shareholding. It must be legislatively backed. You cannot create new regulatory institutes or entities which are pseudo or semi-independent. So they have general oversight, but they are independent entities that can exercise the right to regulate properly, such as the NERC does now in the power sector quite efficiently. So it is a major setback from a legal point of view. What we can do going forward is to audit our processes, and that is already happening. Audit our processes in oil and gas, particularly as they relate to the revenues, incomings and outgoing revenues, you know, in our sector. I'm talking about from the government end, the National Petroleum Company, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, and ensure that the processes are actually being followed and managed in the way that they should be. And when where we find that there are gaps, and there will be leakages, taking adequate and aggressive steps to correct that. So that is happening right now. And I'm expectant, highly expectant, that over the next 3-4 months or so, the implementation of the solutions to cover any gaps will begin to be felt, you know, throughout the economy, because these are highly topical issues at this point. And obviously, the issues of corruption, the issues of having very strong laid down processes and frameworks, particularly in the oil and gas sector. And I say that for Nigeria because this is the sector that drives the entire economy. This is what we feed off. You know, everything else right now, as much as we're trying to diversify our economy, is still secondary in terms of revenue production for the entire country. So we do have to be very, very aggressive in terms of ensuring that our processes are cleaned out and they are implemented in the way and manner that they should be. Now, it has taken years in the making to get them to where, we found them.